Good evening, and welcome to Suffering in Silence with Minister Tia on Luv Bay Afrobeat Music Talk Radio. We're here with you every Friday evening at 7 p.m. Eastern. Luv Bay family, we're rising out of the ashes together. Our topic on this evening is Title IX. We have with us our co-host Jennifer Peterkin, and our guest for the evening is Bob Wood, Title IX coordinator of Gwinnett Mercy University. Luv Bay, we wanted to start this evening with a couple of announcements, if you will. First being, if you don't know, the Luv Bay app is now available, and the app it's awesome. I've downloaded it to my phone, so you can go to Google Play for Androids, or you can go to the App Store for Apple products. But please, if you have not done so already, please get the Luv Bay app. It's really cool. And also, I wanted to share some information from the DAP organization, the Domestic Abuse Project of Delaware County. If you need financial assistance because of domestic violence, DAP's relocation program can help you. The program can provide financial support with a security deposit for a new apartment, a plane or train ticket for relocation to a safe destination, security system equipment to safely maintain your current living environment, replacing necessary items such as medication, photo ID, eyeglasses that were left behind when fleeing domestic violence, overdue utilities, preventing you from having utilities turned on in a new property, and also a P.O. box for 3 months. Funding is limited and must be obtained through an application. To find out if you are eligible, please contact the 24/7 crisis hotline at 610-565-4590. Some applications require proof of income. And again, this is the Domestic Abuse Project of Delaware County. This is in Media, Pennsylvania, in the United States. Again, the phone number is 610-565-4590. And I have shared in the past, this is the organization in my local area, the organization that I personally received help from. And I received help from their financial assistance program when I left my domestic violence situation. I did have to fill out an application, but it was a process that my DV counselor helped me with. She walked me through it, and I was given $1,500 to help me move into the new home that I found. It was $1,500 that was given to me. It was not a loan. It was not something that was held over my head. It was truly a help. So if you can take advantage of this, please call the number and, go through the process to see if they are able to help you. Also, the Domestic Abuse Project of Delaware County, they have a financial empowerment virtual workshop. Some of the topics include financial safety planning, financial planning, saving and spending, credit and debt repair, planning to buy a home, pay rent or education, and also retirement planning. You can call the 24/7 crisis hotline for more information, again at 610-565-4590. And as usual, listeners, if you have questions or comments for our guest or co-host, you can email us at sufferinginsilencedv@gmail.com. If you have resources that you would like to share with us on a national or local level from your country, community, your local organizations, or your faith community, you can also email us at sufferinginsilencedv@gmail.com. With that, Jen, would you like to greet our listeners on this evening?
Yes. Hello, Luv Bay family. For those that are new, my name is Jennifer Peterkin. I am one of the co-hosts on Suffering in Silence. I am a domestic violence advocate. I became a domestic violence advocate after going through my own abusive marriage. And it's been such a pleasure and an honor and a privilege to be able to meet and speak with other survivors in this area. So I am currently working on a project called The Human Experience, where we share stories about people's experiences and how they affect who we are as people and how we relate to each other. So if you want to check that out, you can visit getthehx.com. or you can follow me on Instagram at GetTheHX.
Thank you so much. Bob, would you please introduce yourself to Luv Bay, or reintroduce yourself to Luv Bay on this evening?
Thank you. Good evening to everybody at the Luv Bay audience, Ms. Peterkin, and yourself, and everybody that's listening in. Thank you so much for having me here. It's a privilege, and it's an honor to be here. My name is Bob Wood. I'm the Title IX coordinator for Winnet Mercy University, and I'm a little bit of a rarity in the field of Title IX. The average career length is about 5 years, and this is my 13th year of being in this business. And I jokingly have said to everybody, people have asked me, how have you made it this long in Title IX? I said, well, I used to be in law enforcement. This is a lot easier. So there's a little bit less stress. But as I said, I've been in it for about 13 years. And I'll also preface this entire journey we're going to take this evening, going through some material. There's a real irony to it. Title IX is in its 50th anniversary. It came into being and hit college campuses in 1972 as part of the Education Amendment Acts. And in 1972, I was a 185-pound safety trying to play football at Towson State College in Baltimore. So, and I watched all the coaches and all the male sports running around with their hair on fire thinking they're going to lose their programs. I'm like, calm down, coach. Just take it easy. But literally, I've come full circle. That I came back around to this is kind of ironic. So.
Awesome.
But here I am.
Thank you so much. So, Luv Bay, as usual, we want to start with sharing some resources. And April is Sexual Assault Awareness Month. So we want to share the following information. The Polaris Project National Human Trafficking Hotline. Their number is 1-888-373-7888, or you can text the words Be Free, BEFREE. You can text the words Be Free to the number 233-733. And their website is polarisproject.org. And Polaris is POLARIS. We also have the Pennsylvania Coalition Against Rape, PCAR. Their website is www.pcar.org. And the Rape, Abuse, and Incest National Network, also known as RAIN. Their website is www.rainn.org. And we have the National Sexual Violence Resource Center. Their website is www.nsvrc.org. And again, tonight, listeners, our topic is Title IX. And with that, Bob, I will turn it over to you to tell us what does Title IX mean and what does it do?
What does Title IX mean and what does it do? I always like to start out with Title IX is a ball of confusion built on the sands of litigation. It's always changing. I mean, no, it's the truth. I mean that jokingly, honestly. What does Title IX do? It ensures that every student, male, female, gender identification, gets equal access to educational opportunities and activities on every college campus that takes financial federal funding, or any other institution that takes financial federal funding. It is founded, or actually grounded, in the Civil Rights Act of 1964. Okay? Because again, you can see there's a comparison there. The Civil Rights Act of 64 is based on race, color, religion, sex, or national origin, in areas of employment and public accommodation. And Title IX, no one can be discriminated against on the basis of sex discrimination, gender identification, in an education or an institution that takes federal financial assistance. And when we talk about federal financial assistance, we talk about federal loans and things of that nature. So just about every university in the United States is subject to Title IX. Very few. The very, very private ones, different story, religious, and there's sometimes religious not religious, qualification that they can step away a little bit from in that vein. But primarily, just about every university. Quick, brief history. It was started by Representative Patty D. Mink. And as I said, it dealt primarily initially with equity in athletics. I don't know the exact numbers. Let me take a quick check here. I know when it first came out, something, I don't know, so there were women in sports, it was, say, an average of 30,000 to 170,000 in universities, and it looked to balance that out and give equal access to females to women in sports programs. And again, as I said, when it first started, I kind of chuckled because the coaches in male sports were literally running around afraid they'd lose their programs. And that wasn't the idea at all. The idea was to balance it out. For instance, a football program takes a lot more money to run than a softball program, but the softball program is entitled to equal access to a playable field, a practice area, a locker room, things of that nature.
Right.
So they had to balance it out. And with the major universities, there's a whole large formula that, quite honestly, I have to go back and refer to the sheets too because I'm not a mathematician, but there is a whole large formula of how to work out the scholarship monies and things of that nature so that it works out equitably. I work with our athletic director in maintaining some of that. He apprises me of what's going on. I make sure that that forms and everything's are there, and I sign off and work with him and advise, and we both work with the president of the institution. But my primary area of responsibility is in the area of Title IX and sexual harassment, sexual assault, or sexual misconduct on college campuses. That's brief history with me. As I said, I've been in it for about 13 years now. Literally, when the first incident came to my door and somebody said, "Hey, you know how to do an investigation, don't you?" And I went, "Yes." I was happily the dean of students at a very small institution. And I went, "Yeah, why?" And they said, "Well, we have a Title IX incident." And I did. My first reaction was, "There's a problem with the sports program?" I was like, "Well, no." And I suddenly realized I needed to do a lot of reading and a lot of catching up very quickly, which obviously I did. So let me talk about a little bit, if you don't mind, some of the responsibilities of a Title IX coordinator. Yes. One would be to oversee complaints of sexual assault and sexual harassment. That's obvious. They can investigate at this point in time. They also oversee other Title IX coordinators and other investigators. And I'll circle back to them in a minute. Another requirement is to update their policies as needed because it changes. Most recently, Title IX went from United States Code 1681-87, not necessarily a law, but guidance that was being disseminated by the Office of Civil Rights, U.S. Department of Education, and presidential executive orders. It is now law, Code of Federal Regulations 24, Part 106, and that came about 2020. So it's changed. It has evolved there. So we had to do updates reference to that. Number one is apprise the upper administration of any issues related to Title IX that might potentially be problematic in general. And I'm sure, we've all seen reports in the news where institutions have had some issues with a Title IX complaint, mishandled, it hit the news because of the size of the athletic program. I'm not picking on athletics, but whatever, those instances occur. The other area is training. I'm responsible to make sure that there's annual training for my deputies, of which we have two, and at Gwinnett Mercy, and I'm very proud to say that because we didn't have two when I got there. We have two now.
Progress.
That's one thing I did well. I'm also responsible to ensure our appeals hearing panel. We have 5 people. No, we have 4. We just lost one. 4 people at that panel. I have to replace the one that left because there's new guidelines to how the hearings and appeals can be conducted. And I'm also responsible to ensure the hearing officer has access to the training because that is the person that's going to be making the final decision on whatever comes through from the inquiry. And As far as faculty, staff, and students, responsible for training across the board there. Also responsible, the NCAA has put out some mandates that coincide with Title IX and work with athletics specifically above and beyond Title IX. So we work with the coaches and the athletes on those. We also handle training for the residential assistants because there's, and I'm going to circle back to that because they become important as the first listener in an inquiry, and also our orientation leaders. And we're responsible also for the online student component, making sure they receive some type of training, especially in cyber stalking, which we'll talk about as we move forward. Liaison with Counseling Center, liaison with our community partners, Laurel House, Monaco, Nova, Luv Bay, whoever we're working with. Pennsylvania Coalition Against Domestic Violence, and PCAR, Pennsylvania Coalition Against Rape. I have to be certified every year annually. My deputies have to be certified every year annually. And right now we're affiliated with a thing called Student SUNY Conduct Institute, and it's about 8 hours of study each year that we have to go through. I'm also affiliated with a group called ATIXA, which is the Association of Title IX Administrators. In fact, I have to renew my individual membership, but through them, I've worked my way through investigator certifications, levels 1 through 5, and EDS coordinator, and they each are topic specific as you move through those. And I've received certification through the National Coalition of University Attorneys, college and university attorneys, and I've attended seminars at Tulane School of Law for certification. So you can see there's a lot of background. And I said there's it's ever changing with administrations, laws, case precedent, etc. Let's see, what else can we do? Oh, also liaison with local law enforcement. That's very important. And establish MOUs also with our community partners, memorandums of understanding. And the part that I really, really enjoy, because then I get throughout the year to work with students, as you know, because you just graciously participated in one of our educational events. Try to stage educational events and partner with other entities on college in doing that. We did the Murdered Missing Indigenous Women and Relatives events this year. We did in Domestic Violence Month. We had a table up and did some educational stuff there. Sexual Assault Month, we've done Walk a Mile in Her Shoes, in which the entire campus gets to come watch me roam around for a mile in high-heeled shoes and a kilt. And everybody gets there's always a bet. Is he going to make the mile this year? Yes, I so far I've made it all the years.
Wow.
Yeah, I usually don't walk right for the next couple of days, but it's a good event, and it's to raise awareness, domestic violence, sexual assault, etc. As you know, we just did Take Back the Night, in which you were graciously our speaker, and greatly appreciate that. And May 5th, May 5th is National MMIW Awareness Month or Day, and I'm going to try to stage a small event for that.
Nice.
So that's a general, quick, blown overview of that. The other one, which I didn't state, which is keep yourself abreast of what's going on in litigation with Title IX. So that's kind of where I go from that particular point.
Okay. So can I ask you a couple questions?
You can.
All right, so I just want to make sure that I'm clear. It sounds like Title IX started as making sure that females had equality on college campuses with athletic activities, and it expanded to include protections against sexual assault and domestic violence and things of that nature on campus. Is that right?
That is correct. Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And
yes.
so my question... I'm sorry. Oh, you can
and it's still there. It still has that focus.
Okay. And so now I want to ask you, but it's not just focused on the athletic teams, but the entire universities or the entire college providing protections against discrimination and sexual assault and domestic violence. So it's not just focused on teams.
Correct.
Okay. And
Absolutely.
does it matter if there are issues that happen on campus or off campus? Is the primary focus, if I'm a student at this university and something happens to me off campus, can I still come to you as Title IX coordinator with whatever issue that I have?
There's some gates that would be associated with that. If technically under the new ruling, under the final guidance with CFR 24 Part 106, if it's off campus and it has nothing to do with our students, like it's not a student on student issue, technically there's not much I can do except offer guidance, get you counseling, offer the services and resources.
Okay.
The thing about the law, where the law is, it's sort of the ground floor, and if you wish to offer assistance above that, you can. You just can't go below that. Does that make sense? I'm hoping what I just said. Mm-hmm. I cannot, if somebody comes to me with a student-on-student issue that is sexual harassment, and, in the back of my head for some reason, I go, no, I can't do that. Now, I can offer more service, but I can never offer below what I'm mandated to offer. Mm-hmm. So, at Gwinnett, and it's pretty good, I'm very pleased to say that anything that impacts a student academically that falls under a Title IX category, sexual assault, sexual harassment, domestic violence, because VAWA also is involved. And VAWA encompasses domestic violence, dating violence, and stalking. Mm-hmm. We have offered services, and I've usually worked with the faculty and administrators in making sure the student gets an academic accommodation. Okay? Because again, there's, well, I'm kind of jumping around here, but I will say, the 13 years that I've done this, the one thing that I have always come back and said, there's one thing all victims have in common, absolutely have in common: trauma.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And that trauma just deeply impacts. Now, that impact can manifest in different ways, mm-hmm. but it most certainly impacts the student, the individual. And it can most definitely interfere with their ability to continue forward with their academics. Especially, as most of us know, the traditional college student, although there are still a large number of traditional college students, but that traditional age range has changed. Yes. Many, myself included. I ended one career and went back to school and got some more degrees. So I was in school at 50. And trying to figure out what everybody around me was saying and doing, especially with computers. But, and we have many students today who are married, have children, they're partners, whatever, and these issues, unfortunately, sometimes do surface, and we have to assist them. Let me think. What else here?
I have a question.
Yes.
Well, it's something you already touched on, but I really am interested because it never occurred to me when you talked about doing training for your online students. It's such a big part of the collegiate experience now, but I never put those two together. So can you talk about what that looks like and how that expanded?
Sure. Cyberbullying and cyber stalking. As I said, I had mentioned stalking. Most people tend to associate stalking with the physical one-on-one, somebody following them. There's a long definition, but it's basically activities targeting a person that puts a reasonable person in fear. In other words, basically, that person's looking over their shoulder constantly. And you can do that cyber. If I remember correctly, the National Crime Institute, and 7 million Americans were stalked. And the majority of it much of it came from cyber. I had a statistic here somewhere. I'll dig through and find it in a minute. But what I do know with cyber stalking is it comes in the form of emails, phone calls, mm-hmm. Text messaging, to the point where people are afraid to open up their computers and check their emails. Mm-hmm. I remember working with a young person who the other party blew their phone up to the tune of 100 phone calls in an evening. One, and with phone devices today, you can track somebody or you can try to figure out where they're located. Mm-hmm. Another instance where a party called, a young person was at a movie with a friend and basically started screaming at them, where are you? And then demanded that they take a picture and send it to them so they could verify. And fortunately, the friend took her phone and went, no. But, those things occur. There can be harassment in an online class. Somebody can send, emails, remarks, things of that nature that somebody finds uncomfortable. So, sadly, it is there. And so we have to deal with it. How do we train individually? I usually do a cyber presentation. I'll do a PowerPoint, and it's inserted into the orientation for the online students. And of course, I have my information, and they're free to call me or text or whatever they wish to do.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, there's so much technology, while fantastic, in some ways has just made things so much worse. And I know we talk about a lot, like teen dating violence. There's really been an uptick in that because of technology and social media and all of that. So, yeah, it's a big deal.
And, I'm glad you said something about teen dating violence, because we have students who, every institution that I've been at, I've moved around in 13 years a little bit, but frequently I will have students come into my office who have had an incident that occurred in their lives before they got to the institution. Mm-hmm. And most of us who deal with individuals who have been traumatized know that they don't necessarily report it the day after.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, I've told people, I know a guy who hung onto his story for 54 years. Mm. I remember speaking in D.C. with a group called End Rape on Campus. It was during the Kavanaugh hearings. And I was speaking about what had happened with Dr. Ford, about how she had been called out for not reporting. I said, I'm staying away from the politics. I want to address the question of why people don't report. I said, what happened? That's precisely why.
Yeah.
They don't wish to be, verbally lambasted that way, or questioned or criticized. And so many people will hold on to their stories. So frequently I'll, at some point during the year, I'll have a freshman, sometimes even a senior, who has, and then finally decided I need to talk. And there's, pardon me, as it occurred outside of our institution when they were younger, there's not a whole lot I can do to go back and address it from my position as a Title IX coordinator, but certainly as a Title IX coordinator who's empathetic and try to get counseling. And I'm going to talk about training, but the one thing I can always do is listen.
Yeah.
Is listen. So that, so again, that is definitely something that's very prevalent today. And again, I'm glad you brought that up, because there is a statistic. There's a propensity for people who have been abused or assaulted to be reassaulted. Mm-hmm. And it has a lot to do with the neuroscience, how they reacted the first time, they freeze up or what, those types of things. But again, it's not uncommon. It's not uncommon at all. So.
Yeah.
So, Bob, thinking about the line of young people, does Title IX affect or have a place in high schools? Or,
oh, yes.
So can you tell us about that?
Yes. Every school must have somebody who's a designated Title IX coordinator. Most of the colleges, or many, I'll stick with most. Most of the colleges go with a full-time designated. That's your job. That's the one thing you do. Mm-hmm. Some institutions still have it as an ancillary duty. Many times you'll find it attached to HR. Sometimes you may find out, infrequently counseling for obvious reasons. But many times it's HR, somebody in that area. We did that before I arrived. I am the first full-time Title IX coordinator at Glendon. And the schools must have one also.
Okay.
Every high school, elementary school, any school.
Wow, elementary schools? Wow.
Yes, ma'am.
I'd never heard of Title IX being in the younger parts of education. So it doesn't matter if schools are public, private, or Catholic. There must be a Title IX coordinator in every school.
If they are receiving some type of financial or federal financial funding, they must have a coordinator.
Wow,
They're
this is very interesting.
They're responsible for it. Yeah. Sadly, I don't. I have read of incidents that have occurred, in middle schools, grade schools, without going into depth and detail. I mean, I can remember before Title IX took effect, as it did. I was teaching inner city Baltimore. Won't name the school because that would be inappropriate. But it was an inner city neighborhood. There was an incident that occurred with 4 young men and a young lady, and it was an ugly incident. But the attitude was to immediately suspend the young lady and send the 4 boys back to class. And I kind of went, "Whoa, time!"
Oh wow,
Can I talk to you for a minute? I mean, Title IX was not even on the picture at that point. I said, "You can't do that. It's not equitable." And we had this long conversation about it. And finally, the person I was speaking with went, "Yeah, you're right. That's really not equitable." And I said, "No, it's not." I said, all 5 of these individuals were involved in this. And if you're going to go down that road, we have to make sure that we maintain, equity working our way through this.
Right.
Which today, whole different story because Title IX does apply, as I said. So going through.
Wow.
If that makes sense, I hope.
Yes, it does. Well, Luv Bay, we want to welcome you again to Suffering in Silence with Minister Tia on Luv Bay Afrobeat Music Talk Radio. We are here with you every Friday evening at 7 p.m. Eastern with a replay on Tuesdays at 7 p.m. Eastern. And Luv Bay, we are continuing to rise out of the ashes together. And I want to give you another reminder to please download the Luv Bay app. It is available on Google Play for Androids and also available in the App Store for Apple products. I'd like to share with you again the information from DAP, the Domestic Abuse Project of Delaware County. If you need financial assistance because of domestic violence, and this is in Media, Pennsylvania, in the United States, DAP's relocation program can help you. They can provide financial support with a security deposit for a new apartment, plane or train ticket for relocation to a safe destination, security system equipment to safely maintain your current living environment, replace unnecessary items such as medication, photo ID, eyeglasses, these things that were left behind when fleeing domestic violence, overdue utilities, preventing you from having utilities turned on in a new property, and a P.O. box for 3 months. Funding is limited and must be obtained through an application. To find out if you are eligible, please contact the 24/7 Crisis Hotline at 610-565-4590. And also, the Domestic Abuse Project of Delaware County is holding a financial empowerment virtual workshop. Topics include financial safety planning, financial planning, saving and spending, credit and debt repair, planning to buy a home, pay rent or education, and retirement planning. You can also call the 24/7 Crisis Hotline for more information at 610-565-4590. And we also have, for your information, the malesurvivor.org website. This is for information on male sexual abuse. The website again is www.malesurvivor.org. The National Sexual Assault Hotline, their number is 1-800-656-4673. We have Strong Hearts Native Helpline. Their website is www.strongheartshelpline.org. Their phone number is 1-844-762-8483. And lastly, we have the Minnesota Indian Women's Sexual Assault Coalition. Their website is www.miwsac.org, and their phone number is 1-877-995-4800. So, Bob, I have one more question, and then I'll turn it over to Jen for her questions and comments. I want to ask you, how has your experience, your past experience in law enforcement, how has that helped you in your Title IX coordinator position?
Initially, obviously I had the basis of how to set up an investigation or an inquiry. Something I noticed in law enforcement long before I ever had what is called trauma-informed interview training, or FETI. I learned it very early. People do not take a notebook to their assault.
Right.
We all remember the TV shows where the police officer is looking at the victim. How tall was he? What color shirt did he have on? What were you doing at the corner of 33rd and 3rd? And I'm sitting there going, wait a minute, even as a, and when I was working in plain clothes, I'm like, okay, wait a minute, before you assault me, let me get my pen and pad. Okay, go. That doesn't happen. So the biggest takeaway is something that it is the first thing I say to anybody that I am training to be an investigator, a coordinator, an RA, an OL, a member of the faculty or staff. If anybody, a person comes to you, male, female, anybody comes to you and say, hey, I want to talk to you about something that occurred to me, there's two things. Number one, they've just paid you an enormous compliment without telling you, because they trust you. Mm-hmm. They trust you. They trust you enough to sit there and talk with you. And number two, the way that you can reinforce that trust is to do what I'm not doing, which is to be quiet and listen. Mm-hmm. Let them talk. Listen. Don't judge. Let them talk. In fact, it is very common for victims who have been highly traumatized to start down one path of conversation and then suddenly go off to the left. Let them go. Mm-hmm. They'll come back. And I've told, as I'm training, training investigators, I've said, the questions you have in your mind, what color hair, things like that, if you let that person talk, 90% of those questions usually are answered. Mm-hmm. They'll get to it. They'll come to it. And it differs with each individual. Some individuals, it may, one interview may, rarely, but one interview may work. Sometimes 2, 3, whatever it takes. And again, in training, in trauma-informed interview technique, we talk about, again, the neuroscience and how the senses can trigger certain things. Mm-hmm. I specifically remember talking with somebody who remembered a color that was in the room, and that helped us narrow down to where the event had happened, where the incident had happened. So yeah, there's that. Those things I took with me from law enforcement, and the other one was my job as the Title IX coordinator / investigator, overseer of investigations. I am not the judge and jury. My job is to collect the information and to see where this evidence goes and to compile a report that here's the information. Boom. This, and then I hand it off to somebody, to the hearing officer. In fact, if you don't mind, I'm going to really digress. My very, very first incident as the /dean of students that was investigating this, I was also supposed to be the hearing officer. And everybody had said, well, you have to hear. And I said, I can't. There's no way I can do that. And the question was why? I said, well, I've investigated it. Clearly, I have an opinion. I know what everything is in that, mm-hmm. I don't know, it was about a 70, 80-page report. And it was instinct to put together a hearing panel and get as many neutral parties as I possibly humanly could. In fact, the analogy I use when somebody's suggested I hear it. I said it would be like a traffic cop giving you the ticket and then sitting there and being the judge in traffic court. That's not going to work out too well.
Right.
So yeah, I guess that sense of the balance in the hearing and the equity in the hearing process kind of carried with me, or at least I tried to. And the new rulings, they go a long way to ensuring that occurs. It has changed a lot. When I first became a Title IX coordinator, frequently you could be the final word, and then I would pass it off. This is what the evidence says. You could pass it off to the next level to enforce it however they wished, whatever sanction they wished to put in. Myself personally, I always like to say this is my opinion, open, and I'd let that person make another final decision on it. But now we must have a hearing that involves cross-examination from individual parties. Each party is entitled to an advocate, and that advocate can be an attorney, obviously. Colleges like Gwinnett, love Gwinnett to death, but it's not Notre Dame. We don't have a budget like Notre Dame. We're not going to be, billable hours with attorneys can run into some steep money very quickly. So we're, hopefully training staff and faculty to become advocates in our process. And the nice thing about with the final rules, the new regulations, we still control the hearing in that it doesn't have to become the traditional courtroom adversarial model that we see, where somebody, the attorney gets right up close and questions right in the person. No, we can control that. And the questions must be relevant to the material in front, and there's no going back into somebody's sexual history unless it's relevant to the incident itself. If that statement makes sense.
Well, can I ask, who's asking the questions?
The questions are being asked by the advocates in the hearing.
Okay.
The witnesses, in fact, we do not use the term complainant and perpetrator. Perpetrator is not part of Title IX coordinator. It's the complainant and the alleged respondent. Okay, and that's, again, something that is now clearly documented under the new regulations. The alleged respondent. There is an assumption of innocence until proven responsible.
Okay.
Just like in a court of law, you're guilty until proven innocent. I don't want to use the word guilty because we're not a court of law; we're an administrative hearing.
And so I'm sorry.
Yes.
And then
No,
Jen, I'll let you ask the next question or give your comment. I wanted to ask, so does this hearing take place before the criminal process, or is this happening at the same time, or does the hearing happen and maybe the criminal process will not happen at all? How does that work?
Excellent question. It's a very good question. If somebody comes to my office and they wish to report something, they have several options. They can literally report it to me and say, I needed you to know. Please put the report in the folder and put it in your file cabinet. Unless, I'm going to preface this, unless there's an immediate threat to the rest of the community. In which case, we have to have a long conversation. I will have a conversation with that individual saying, listen, I need to move ahead with this because, and I notify them before taking any action. They can come in and say that they wish to go through a full inquiry, in which case then that triggers a whole bunch of responses of setting things up, of notification. Each party has to be duly notified. Each party has to be given time to prepare to come in and have that meeting, letters, things of that nature. Each party is entitled to an advocate, as I said, going into the hearing. Personally, we're setting our hearings up so that they're done in individual rooms through video, so nobody has to be face-to-face, trying to avoid that confrontational moment. And the hearing officer is the person who administers the hearing completely. In fact, prior to the hearing, questions should be submitted to the hearing officer. He will go through and make sure everything is relevant. If there's something that the hearing officer, he or she believes is not relevant, they'll have a conversation about that ahead of time with the parties. The only people that can ask questions, I say, are the advocates. There was just an interesting court ruling that it was Boston, no, it was Massachusetts. Under the new guidance, if somebody refused to be cross-examined, their whatever testimony, whatever you had gathered in your inquiry could not be admitted. And the federal court turned around and said, wait a minute, that's unfair to the complainant because an alleged respondent or witnesses that gave statements can suddenly say, hey, I don't want to be cross-examined. And that's just, now you have a glaring hole in it. So we're in that, like I said, it's a ball of confusion on shifting sands of litigation. Here we are. People are trying to figure out which way do we go. We're going to go with, if you made the statement, in the inquiry, we're going to admit it. And give everybody due notice of that. I mean, usually myself, whenever I'm doing something, I have the witness, both parties, go back over their statement before I finalize anything. And if somebody says they want to add or amend, I will do that. But as an addition or an amendment to what I have originally done. Final reports, all parties, both parties are involved or entitled to the final report. Which again, you would ask me about coming from law enforcement. I've been doing that for quite a while. Because again, if you think of law enforcement, the person's charged, they get a statement of charges. And tells them precisely what's going on, which only made sense to me. And I based that, I'm not going to name the university, but there was a rather large university where it's been 7 years, I believe, 7, 8 years, where a young person was found responsible. They appealed, and in that process, the administration denied them access to some of the documents. Well, that went against the university, in the end run. So, and again, to me, it's put it in your report. It's there for everybody to read. If you want to, you have something additional, I will put that in as an additional amendment. Doesn't mean it's going to change what I've found from that point forward. But and that's the best way to keep it keep the playing field level.
And so, does a criminal hearing automatically happen after?
No. No, I'm sorry, because I got away from that when I got into it. The person does not have to file criminal charges for Title IX.
Okay.
Again, if the person decides they wish to file criminal charges, and I should have stayed with that, the two inquiries run parallel, but clearly Title IX takes a little bit of a backseat to a criminal investigation.
Right.
Because again, we're an administrative hearing. The most impact we're going to have is you need to go to another school, you're suspended, you got to go through this training, whatever. Whereas in criminal, you can go to jail.
Right.
So, and the two evidence standards are completely different. We work on what's called a preponderance of evidence, more likely than not. Whereas criminal, it's beyond reasonable doubt.
Wow. Jen, you have a question or comment?
Yeah, well, I'll do my comment first because I just want to say that I would like to clone you and put you in every university across the country. Oh my goodness. It is just, the news is awful and you always hear the bad stuff, and I get that. But there is just so much out there for, on college campuses especially, that is not being done for victims and survivors. And just to hear that somebody knows what they're talking about, but not just that, has a empathy and a compassion for it, is just so wonderful. So thank you for what you do, because it really does matter. Knowing with, the stuff that's in the news or whatever, and coming from a domestic violence standpoint or advocacy standpoint, knowing that the law is so far behind in terms of helping victims, they do what they can, but there's so many gaps. what do you find that in your job as well? Like the law has to catch up, or Title IX has to catch up to what actually happens or what falls under the umbrella of abuse and harassment, etc.
As you said, there's a definite large gap between 9 and law. I'll take alcohol. As we know, in many sexual assault situations in college, alcohol is involved. And the PA law, there's the PA statutes deal with alcohol in a dating and rape situation. I hate to use the word dating and rape, but that's how most people describe it. However, preponderance of evidence in a college environment as compared to beyond a reasonable doubt, where you want to put somebody and take away their freedom, you're taking away that liberty, that right. There's a big difference. There's a big gap in there. Even at our level, because again, there has been so much, and I have to say this: there have been incidents where alleged respondents have not gotten the proper protocols. Title IX, if most people are familiar with it, kind of ran a gambit. There's a movie many people should watch entitled The Hunting Ground. And I was very fortunate in working with one of the young ladies in the movie, Sophie Karras, on a couple of occasions. She's tremendous. And I'll be honest with you, there's a scene in the movie, one of the young ladies I had to walk out, made me cry. I mean, good God. But there was, when that, for lack of a better term, was exposed and those types of issues came to the forefront, many institutions pushed hard. The pendulum swung all the way the other way.
Yeah.
To try to rectify it, and some of the cases unfortunately got pushed through, and they weren't pushed through properly. As I just said, the one alleged respondent at the one university was denied access to documents. I mean, how can you prepare? That's it doesn't make sense. So now that the pendulum is swinging back a little bit the other way, and I have sat. And I will not name anybody, but I've sat in the TICSA training where a law firm that deals primarily with alleged respondents, the opening statement was, "I'm waiting for you to make a mistake." Okay. Put that in the back of my file cabinet and said, wherever I'm training, make sure you dot all your I's, cross all your T's, and I am, as much as I can be upfront with an attorney, here it is.
Yeah.
It's like I said, it's shaky on shifting sand.
And what was the biggest? I mean, I know it's so involved and it's so complicated. You just describing a general overview of what you do is. I know that somebody that's not in it is not going to really grasp the full breadth of it, but what is the major takeaway of the new legislation? So what was pushed through in 2020?
Oh, wow. A lot.
Sorry.
No.
7 minutes there.
That's okay. It came out around the end of June. I don't remember the exact date. June 18th. But anyway, we had to be compliant by August 14th. That date I specifically remember. And there were about 3,022 pages of explanation and law. So everybody was going, oh boy. The biggest thing is the hearing process.
Okay.
The hearing process, the notifications, making sure the notification got a little bit more involved. And it's really, in my opinion, it's a little bit more involved, but it's not burdensome. I mean, it's okay. Actually is helping you lay it out in a better fashion. And you can, the biggest thing I will tell, and again, I learned this in police work and the United States Navy, document, and keep your documents in order.
Yes.
Because when somebody asks for them, there they are. And you avoid that hassle. And again, the training component expanded. We have to train the hearing officials. We have to train the hearing panels. we have to publish our training. If you go on our website and go to the Title IX section, you'll see all my, well, not all of it because it's but you'll see my most recent and where we are.
Okay.
And the other one, big too, which I think, I'm glad, I thank you for saying what you said to me about my empathy for people who have been traumatized. I'm going to swing the other way for a second. The words alleged respondent. There must be that presumption of innocence until everything proves otherwise, which again just makes sense. And I've always, 100% always, told my investigators and myself, you have, well, I'll give you my opening statement in a minute, but you have an alleged respondent in front of you. You better offer counseling services there as well.
Mm-hmm.
Because this individual's world just kind of crashed down around them. Many times, what did I do wrong?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It's not clicking. So, I mean, whatever services you're giving, for the complainant, and I used to say reporting person, because people were complaining, yeah, well, they got a right to complain, but it has to be accurate. And I'm very pleased that everybody, my door's always been open both ways.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I've had that compliment. But the one thing I definitely put into my investigators, my coordinators, whoever I work with, and from day one I've always stood on this. Before you begin your interview process, before you begin anything, you're looking across the desk, I want you to think this to yourself. If that was my child, how would I want this process to run?
Mm-hmm.
And that makes a big difference.
Yeah.
It makes a big difference. At least I think it does. So, I try to work from that point forward. And at 68, even when I'm looking at somebody who's an adult student, still, if that were my child,
Sure.
Right.
So, it's it's again, it has to be. You have to apply a lot of common sense to that line, and do your homework. And again, the biggest tool, or the most important tool for Title IX coordinator is listening.
Yeah.
It's listening and moving from there.
Wow.
Yeah.
I hope that made sense.
Yes.
Definitely. That was a big question. So
That's okay. That's okay. No, I mean, literally, that is really a big question. We were very fortunate, and I mean, I have in my training, when I became a Title IX coordinator, I had a master's in education. I immediately went back to law school, and I tell everybody I am not an attorney. I have a master's in legal studies from the University of Washington Law School. I know enough to irritate attorneys, but I immediately said, hey, I've got to go back and study this stuff and get a working knowledge of it. So I would advise anybody that wants to go into this field to do something. You don't have to be an attorney, but get that legal background so that you can read this material. You can understand the way an attorney thinks, how writing the law is written, things of that nature, if that makes good sense.
absolutely. That's such a burdensome part of any federal document, right? Is going through the legalese and actually trying to understand what it says. So, yeah.
Yes,
that makes sense.
For those people who are thinking of going to law school, because we actually had to study, we had to study cases. We just obviously not as in depth as attorneys, but when they took us back to laws from the 16 and whatever hundreds, and you're reading the these and the thous and those, you're sitting there going, oh my God, what are they trying to say? But, and at that point as a student, I'm going, what's the purpose of this exercise? Down the road, now I understand it. Because as you say, you could get a brief that could be 50 pages long. That's not unheard of. So.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, Bob, I have a couple more questions for you. One you
Yes,
kind of already answered. I was going to ask you what services the Title IX coordinator offers to the students when they come in beyond the investigation.
Sure.
If you offered counseling or if you actually connected the students with programs like Laurel House, but it sounds like you do connect them with those services, whatever it is that they may need. Okay.
Yes, ma'am. Usually I will give whoever comes in a list of all of our community partners. My first question is, have you been over to our counseling center? my closing statement is, I have had some students who said, I don't want to talk to anybody but you.
Mm-hmm.
And I have to remind them, I'm not a counselor.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, my door's open. I will listen to you, but I can't give you counseling advice.
Do you have to, or is it up to you to make sure that a student receives medical care, or at least that it's offered to them?
It is offered. We can't really force anybody. We can't force anybody to go to counseling.
Mm-hmm.
We have to make sure the services are available, and unless somebody's incapacitated, in which case, yes, you do what you need to do.
Yeah. Okay. So my last question that I have for you, if you could please tell us, enlighten us, on how your Title IX coordinator journey led you into the Missing, Murdered, and Indigenous Women Trail.
Oh, I'm always reading literature. I mean, I'm always looking. I won't say that I read every piece that comes down the line, but I'm always looking and going through. I don't remember what, but it was a legal article in one of the magazines or one of the blogs, and this topic of MMIW came up, and I'm like, what the heck? I honestly did not know what it was. I have to be very honest. And I started reading it, and the more I started reading it, and I started, reading about the loopholes in the laws, and the one figure that really got me is that as of 2016, 6,700 women had either gone missing or been unaccounted for, and the next paragraph started to describe the jurisdictional issues that were involved, and everybody was fighting it. And then kind of, I guess two parts of me kicked in. One, the Title IX coordinator. But the other part that kicked in was I'm going, as an ex-law enforcement, you guys are arguing over jurisdiction and people are getting hurt. We need to fix this. But it just, I've always had an affinity for the Native American population. In college, I used to do readers theater, and I read something called Touch the Earth, and everybody's like, oh my God. I said, yeah, go back and read a history book. Read the other side of the history book. But the more I started digging into it, and the more that I started seeing the holes and the gaps, this is the whole. There's a lot of things wrong. There's a room full of trees in Washington that have been broken so many times people have lost count. But then you compound it with this. I said, this is insane, and people need to know, and something needs to be done. I know your one guest, Ms. Baylock, Rebecca Baylock, who
Yes.
I love. She has been my mentor in many, many ways. No offense meant, but I told Rebecca, if you ever decide to storm the gates of Hades, let me know. I'll give you a hoka hey and an Aaron go brown. I'll kick the door in for you. She assisted me in taking a course through the Minnesota Women's Sexual Assault Coalition. That was a sexual assault advocate in the reservation system. And, many, many Native American women there, and then Bob. And it was an eye-opener for me.
Wow.
I mean, I knew, but I didn't know completely. And listening, and the one thing that just, I could only shake my head. Clearly, as a police officer, I've been insane, taking people to SANE examinations in hospitals, etc. As a Title IX coordinator, I've recommended people to get there, give them the direction to get there. In some of the reservations, the closest SANE hospital is 2 and 3 hours away. So, the person who's been traumatized goes through a 2 to 4 hour inquiry over who's going to be in charge. Then they finally figure that out, and then it's another 2 or 3 hours in the hospital. So, but I said, that's ridiculous. That's ridiculous. The people they need the services. That was, the lack of a better term, the gross injustice. I just kept on going. So.
Wow. Well, thank you so much. Luv Bay, we are just after the hour. So, Jen, I want to give you the final question or comment, and then Bob will have final words from you before we end for tonight. Jen?
Okay.
Bob, I just want to thank you again for being on. I think this was such an insightful episode, and I think that if you're in America, the university system and what is happening in that system with sexual violence is very relevant to today. So having you be so open with the processes and what's going on was really helpful. So, and I would recommend anybody that really isn't aware or is struggling with knowing, what we mean when we talk about sexual violence on campuses, I would recommend The Hunting Ground.
Bob, you have any final words, final comments you want to leave the listeners with?
Sure. We all know that, many people unfortunately become victims of sexual assault. As I said, there's, and any trauma, domestic violence, dating violence, whatever. I mean, as I said, I had along this story for 54 years. I was the kid in the scenario. But listen to that person. Mm-hmm. If that person comes to you, listen to that person. In fact, sometimes it may not even require you listen. Just sit there. Just sit with the person, because, as I said, if they come to you, they've given you a tremendous compliment. They trust you.
Yeah.
So that's it.
Thank you so much. We will definitely love to have you back with us in the future. Thank you so much. This was wonderful. Again, I've learned more information, so I appreciate that very, very much. Luv Bay, we want to remind you again about the app. So if you have not already downloaded it, please download the Luv Bay app. You can go to Google Play for Androids or the App Store for Apple. I just lost my word. For any Apple products. If you would like to catch up on previous episodes from the program, you can visit our YouTube channel, Suffering in Silence DV. We thank you for joining Suffering in Silence with Minister Tia on Luv Bay Afrobeat Music Talk Radio. We are here with you every Friday evening at 7 p.m. Eastern. In Luv Bay, we are rising out of the ashes together. Good evening.
Thank you.